afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this social media session. A lot is happening in India and across the world, and of course, we are not going to talk about everything that is happening in our lives or in politics or society. But fortunately enough, I think joining me today is a man who is considered or seen as a radical thinker, an academic. Some people call him anti-national as well. He's an author of so many books. So there's a lot to talk about today. But primarily, we'll be talking about his views on Kashmir, his views on Indian foreign policy, and India's relationship with its neighbors, if anything is going wrong there at all in that case. So it's a pleasure to welcome Professor Dibyesh Anand to this social media session. So welcome, sir.
Thank you very much.
So, Professor Anand, last time we talked about Prime Minister Modi and especially the role of BRICS in the world. This time it's going to be different. We will talk, and you have the liberty to take as much time as you can, as long as you answer the questions that people would like to know about. So let me be direct with you and ask this question, because a lot of people believe, considering your views on Kashmir and India, that you are anti-national. So my question to you is, are you anti-national, Professor Dibyesh Anand?
First, let me thank you for giving me the opportunity. It's a social media section. Of course, the kind of discussion we may have is something that should be there on the mainstream media. The fact that it doesn't happen speaks volumes about the state of media in India itself now. The question, are you an anti-national? I mean, in a way, it's an interesting question. I smile at that. But we have to bear in mind that there are hundreds of people in India who get killed or incarcerated, or there are cases against them on the grounds that they're anti-national. That speaks volumes again about the ways in which this whole brand of anti-national is being deployed by the right-wing government to target anyone that is sort of opposed to them, anyone they don't agree with. Now, regarding the question whether I'm anti-national or not, my father used to joke, still jokes about it. He says, but how can he be anti-national? He's British, right? So in the Indian context, it won't work. But the way I would see is, let's say, even if I was Indian, and in that sense, I'm British Indian, right? So I have British nationality, but I'm also Indian. The way I would see is, nation should be about serving human beings, serving the people of that nation. And by that logic, the kind of politics that adopt, the kind of, let's say, radical politics that adopts, is for the people in India. It doesn't imply that I have to side with the state. So I'm critical of the state. I'm critical of the ruling ideas, not only one government, ruling ideas. I'm critical of all injustices that take place in the name of Indian nation. By that logic, one could say I'm more pro-national than the ruling party and ruling regime that seems to be dividing the country.
Yeah, but when one would look into what you're writing on Twitter or Facebook for that matter, it appears that you are very much against not only the ruling government, but everything that India has been known for by far. For example, if you ask any average Indian about the issue of Kashmir, they would say it's a part of India. You say free Kashmir. And that does not go with the general sense of what an Indian would think like. So why are you challenging the system in a way?
See, it's very clear again. Take example of British rule in India, right? If you had asked most of the British people, they would say, but we are ruling India for good of Indians themselves, right? So should we privilege the views of the Indians in that context, or should we privilege the views of the British? The logic is, of course, you have to privilege the view of the colonized, privilege the view of the oppressed, right? Now, when take example of domestic violence, for example, if you asked most men who abuse women, their wives, they would say, well, this is our right, this is who we are. Women would say, that's not right. So by that logic, again, asymmetry of power, when I'm talking of Kashmir and free Kashmir, I'm very clear. It is about listening to the voice of people of Jammu and Kashmir. Now, if Indians go to Kashmir, right, which is the colony of India, they speak to Kashmiris, they may realize that they have no right to speak in the name of the Kashmiris. Now, I'm not claiming to speak in the name of the Kashmiris, just bear that in mind. I'm just saying India has not allowed the voice of Kashmiris to be heard. It hasn't respected it. They haven't treated them with dignity. So again, by that logic, if India is a true democracy, which claims to be a democracy, then it should listen to the voice of the people. Democracy cannot be about majority rule. So the fact that, let's say, 90% of Indians will think Kashmir belongs to us, that's not relevant, because if 10% or whatever, if majority of Kashmiris believe they don't belong to India, then they have the right to assert their self-determination.
Okay, then there are two important points. One is about what the majority thinks in a democracy, and should the majority be the ultimate view in a democracy. That's one part. But before that, you said something very interesting. You gave the example of what would have happened if the British were still ruling India, and if the Indians said, oh, we don't want to be ruled. If the British said, no, but we are ruling for you. in a way, you're comparing the Indian government or the Indian dispensation that we have today with the colonial masters. How fair is that?
Very fair, because if you look at the example or definition of colonialism, colonialism is about asymmetry of power. It is about one group of people occupying another territory and ruling the people of that territory by saying that they belong to us. So there's a proprietorial relation. There's a whole notion that we are there to liberate them, we are there to sort of help them. By that logic, when you see France and Algeria or Britain and India, there is absolutely no difference between that colonial context and India and Kashmir. Again, I think it's a very simple test for Indians to come. If they believe that Kashmiris genuinely want to be part of India, say clearly, let's have a referendum, give them the voice, let them choose India or Pakistan or independence. And if India is so confident that it's unfair to compare, let's say, India and Kashmir with the British in India, I'm sure most Kashmiris by that logic should side with India, isn't it? So why not listen to them?
So one of the arguments is that people in Kashmir are allowed to vote for the government, whichever they want to go for. That did not happen when we were British colonies. We didn't have the kind of freedom that people of Kashmir, or for that matter, any other state in India would have today, right? So what happens to all the things that the government does, the people who are chosen by the people of Kashmir? Do you think that there is absolute anarchy there and they're colonial?
No, see, if anarchy would be a good idea, anarchist politics, so that's not the anarchy I know you mean. And now, take example of China, right? A lot of people in the world recognize that China occupies Tibet and East Turkestan / Xinjiang, right? That a lot of people recognize, including many Indians. They will have sympathy for Tibetans. By the Chinese logic, of course, people in Tibet have the right to vote. They have right to vote only for the Communist Party, and one candidate, one vote. So the idea is people have the right, by the way. Again, in Indian context, the Kashmir context, take example of the ongoing Panchayati election. In many places, the BJP has been elected without any opposition. That's because no one stands for the election, right? Now, you have to understand that when political parties in Jammu and Kashmir, especially in Kashmir Valley, they fight the election, they never say that Kashmir is not a dispute. They will say it's for the Bijli Sarak Pani, right? And yet, the same elections are presented by the Indian nationalists as validating Indian position. So you can't have that because, of course, Kashmir is an internationally recognized dispute, and India and Pakistan have acknowledged that in the past. Right? So coming back to the question of, let's say, what should be my position? I'm not the important person here. For any self-respecting Indian, if they believe in human rights, if they believe that all human beings are equal, right? By that logic, they have to listen to what Kashmiri people want. They can't just say, oh, no, this belongs to us and therefore we keep quiet, and then brand anyone who opposes that as anti-national.
So let's set the records straight. You are not pro-Pakistan, you are pro-Kashmir.
I'm very clear. I'm not pro-India, not pro-Pakistan. I'm very much in favor, first, clearly against the denial of human rights. That's there, right? But I'm also in favor of right to self-determination. So by that logic, yes, in this context, right, I'm very much pro-Kashmir. Pro-Kashmir because Kashmiris should decide whether they want to be part of India. They can decide that. They could be part of Pakistan or they want to be independent from both. For me, it's very clear, and I think it should be a very simple answer in the world. If people don't, in a collective, over the years have shown they don't want to be part of a particular country, they should be allowed the right to self-determination, which is an international law. Why not? I mean, and India being democracy, because a lot of Indians take pride that they're world's largest democracy, should have all the confidence in allowing that to happen. Again, sorry, one more point. Indian media portrays Pakistan as a failed state, a horrible state, this, that. And of course, there are a lot of problems with Pakistan, no doubt. By that logic, see, if Indians are so confident they're the best country in the region, if not in the world, it should be a very simple solution. Allow Kashmiris the right to self-determination and let's see what they decide.
But then, so when you see people, and I think a lot of viewers would know that because we see a lot of politicians from Pakistan, their agencies, being involved in what is called the freedom of Kashmir. So don't you think that it will be a dangerous precedent? So today you say, okay, we will have a referendum on Kashmir, tomorrow we will have something on Jharkhand, then somewhere else in South India or Northeast. So where does this whole thing leave the country in the end? Because if you start doing referendums after referendums, do you think it will simply endanger the idea of India together as a nation or as a country?
You're right. I mean, there's a whole fear of balkanization. That's what it is, right? So the fear is if you allow one, then everyone else will collapse, right? But that again speaks volumes about the deep insecurity that Indian nation, in this case Indian, by the all nations have it, but in this case Indian nation has. If India fears, or if Indians fear that if you allow one small part, the right to self-determination, then you're assuming that they'll want to separate, number one, which means you know that it's illegal occupation. Second, if you allow them to separate, others may want to separate. But if India is a good democracy, if it allows the opportunity to everyone as equal, why should India be so not so confident that actually people will want to stay with them? Maybe more regions from around the world will want to be part of India. That's also possible, right?
But how
Why
does
have
state
that
function in that
insecurity?
case? How would the state function? Because we saw a referendum in this country, and there's a huge discussion going on around the future of United Kingdom when it leaves the European Union. I mean, nobody knows about the economy and job security and state security in that sense.
We should compare with the Scottish referendum, by the way, right? Because there's very different kind of referendum. In Britain, allowed referendum in Scotland. Slight majority decided to remain part of the UK, right? So that result. So UK did not start with panic that, okay, if we allow referendum to Scotland, then Scotland will go, Wales will go, Northern Ireland will go, London will go, Cornwall will go. That fear was there. But they were mature democracy in the sense that they allowed it, and of course, UK is strong in that. Now, Brexit referendum is a very different kind of referendum. It could be like an Indian context saying a referendum to decide whether India should become a Hindu nation or not, kind of thing. So it's a different kind of thing. Now, coming back to Pakistan, he said some Pakistani leaders or agencies may work for freedom of Kashmir. I think that's a misnomer. I mean, there's no evidence that Pakistanis are working for freedom of Kashmir. What Pakistanis are working for is Kashmiris to join Pakistan. And in that context, both India and Pakistan are very similar. They both claim to be the legitimate rule of Jammu and Kashmir. In a way, Pakistan is slightly more clever. So in international forum, they say we believe in right to self-determination of Kashmiris. But their right to self-determination is reduced to joining Pakistan. When right to self-determination, a healthy one would be either Pakistan, India, or independence. Pakistan doesn't allow anyone who supports independence to fight elections in the so-called AJK, Azad Jammu and Kashmir, which India will call Pakistan Occupied Kashmir. They don't allow that. That itself shows to you that Pakistan is in a way mirror opposite of India. It's just that Pakistan hasn't committed the same level of human rights abuses in Jammu and Kashmir. It may have conducted elsewhere, right? Balochistan and other places. Right. It hasn't done so far because people haven't opposed it. But the reality is both states are product of British in that sense, and both are behaving like colonial states.
So one of the arguments again is, so people like you, when they talk about the rights of people in Kashmir or elsewhere, they talk about the atrocities that have been inflicted upon them. The other argument is that what about the terrorism that is seeping through the doors of Kashmir into the whole of Indian state and making it unstable? So what are your views on that? So not everybody who is fighting in the Kashmir or on the roads or sort of, coming up with those black flags or whatever that is all against the Indian occupation. There are people who are sponsored by certain elements. Would you agree to that? Or do you think it's all Indian government's fault there?
No, I'm not saying it's all Indian government's fault. See, again, it can never be. When you're in a conflict region, when you study conflict region, you realize it's quite complicated. Forget India, Pakistan. There's also so many conflicts between the different groups, be it on religious line, language line, regional line in Jammu and Kashmir. So it's not a simple thing, right? So I'm not someone who says, oh, all Kashmiris are equally oppressed. And by say Kashmiris, it's that I'm saying all people of Jammu and Kashmir are equally oppressed. Now, in this context, you see, you have to understand that what India calls terrorists, now, many of them and many of the people who have been killed by India have not even picked up arms. They're small kids, young kids. Now, India may say it's collateral damage. The moment a country starts justifying violence against civilians by using the language of collateral damage, and we see that what happened with the US in Iraq, Afghanistan, and many in India would see that as actually a colonial intervention, some kind of neo-colonial intervention. But in India and Kashmir, a lot of Indian nationals are willing to accept things done which they won't accept against themselves. So recently, this tech guy was killed in an encounter in UP, and one of his brothers or relatives said that, oh, this is not Kashmir, why is it happening here? And that statement itself says to you that Indians are willing to accept Kashmir as a state of exception where India should be allowed to use all brutal forms of violence. Now, are there people in Jammu and Kashmir who use violence to resist India? Yes, they are. Right? They are. But you have to understand why they get some popular legitimacy or not. But when you look at the human rights abuses, when you look at the killings and everything, there's no comparison between the state violence and the non-state violence. And ultimately, state is responsible because state claims to be the legitimate power. So in this context, what India needs to do is be genuinely democratic, allow right to self-determination, and then deal with actors who are using violence to terrorize the population. And you said that terrorism spreading from Kashmir to rest of India kind of thing, right? I mean, if anything, there's terrorism against Kashmiri population, Kashmiri young students in taking place in different towns and cities of India. During Republic Day, Independence Day, there are Kashmiri young men especially who have to go inside, sit inside because police will arrest them. Is that not form of terrorism? In fact, there's hardly any evidence of Kashmiris taking up arms in Delhi, Bombay and shooting at people. But there are a lot of evidence in different parts of India where Kashmiri students are targeted, called anti-national, beaten up in India. So, I think that's the form of terrorism that's taking.
Yeah, but if you raise slogans against India, of course they would call you anti-national because you don't seem to be interested in what what is for the betterment of India as a nation or as a country. You don't seem to be believing in that idea. So because a lot of people feel that it is very romantic, to stand up against, I don't love my country, this country is oppressive, let's take up arms. Or even for that matter, don't take arms. But if you have this sort of radical idea, you want to be characterized or identified as somebody who believes in going in a different direction than the rest of the country. So it sounds very interesting, but is it practical? Do you think a lot of people are carried away by this very idea of thinking different?
No, I think not enough people are carried away by that, because if they were, then India would not be that oppressive in Kashmir. Of course, there are other examples also. See, India is very oppressive as a state, but not India. Indian state is deeply oppressive against majority of population for its own problem, be it Dalits, tribals, Adivasis, so many, right? So let's not go into even that nature of Indian state. Now,
is it changing, by the way? So before I go into the Kashmir issue again, so when you say Indian state is very oppressive in nature, what do you mean by that?
If you look at the nature of the Indian state, or for that matter, any state, so this is why I say for that matter, we are focusing on India. State by its very nature is legal monopoly over violence. But states are hijacked by the elite interest. So when you take example of the Indian state, we shouldn't be surprised that they took the British colonial laws and implemented it. Because Indian state, essentially, like Pakistani state, Chinese state, they all believe in a certain European notion of sovereign state. And that European notion of sovereign state had a very close link with coloniality. So by that, what I'm saying is, and this is a radical anarchist position I adopt, all states are inherently violent, all states are inherently oppressive, unless the system holds them accountable, right? And that's what a democracy ought to do. So Indian state will be inherently oppressive unless the democracy is functioning enough to restrain it. Now in Indian context, it's a mixed bag in terms of results. What we find, of course, is because of the growing ideology of Hindu nationalism, the state is being used by the Hindu nationalists, and the state is using the Hindu nationalists to be more oppressive and get away by calling anyone that opposes it, right, as anti-national. Now, regarding the romanticism idea, what I would say is the fear of balkanization is a real one, but that should only be real if you don't have confidence that your country is doing well. If your country is doing well and is genuinely democratic, there's no reason for fear.
So how many referendums do you want? So tomorrow, if Northeast says we want a referendum on the issue, do you think that, okay, because you are fearful about it, you don't want to have a referendum on that issue? So should we go on a series of referendums? How would that end?
No, see, again...
And how do we also know the fact that every Kashmiri is wanting what you're saying?
I won't know. You won't know. No one knows, right? The point is, why not ask them? What I'm saying is not to give them this or that. We don't have the right to give them. It's for them to take it, isn't it? Rights are never given. It's also about taking it. It's to create a structure where India and Pakistan agree, because remember it's an international dispute, India and Pakistan agree in a credible manner to allow the voices of all people of Jammu and Kashmir, not only Kashmiri Valley, right, to be heard, for them to decide between India, Pakistan and independence. That's what I'm saying. Now, whether that would encourage, for instance, imagine, India is a flourishing democracy according to many Indian nationalists. Everything doing good, and India has a prime minister that's so powerful, and everything is respected by the world, and all those propaganda.
Is he not?
We'll come to him. If you believe in all that propaganda, right, why not test it? Allow Jammu Kashmir people to vote. If majority of them, or even significant majority, vote for India, then can you imagine how strong India would be, right? So the fear of balkanization doesn't work. Now, if people of Jammu Kashmir decide not to be part of India, then they should be sort of soul-searching. Now, I don't believe in soul, but in soul-searching amongst Indians, that why, despite being such a great nation, such a nation which is so non-violent and open to everyone, people of Jammu Kashmir don't want to be part of it. And that soul-searching may allow India to become then a better democracy and therefore prevent any kind of further balkanization.
But it is not the solution. Is it a long-term solution? So, for example, when you say that states are inherently violent, right? By that logic, I think any state in the world would be called violent. So,
potentially violent, yeah.
Yeah. What are we searching for? Is there any end to this discussion? Do you think there is there is any sort of way where you can find a state which is not violent or sort of open-hearted and where everything is absolutely perfect.
See, no, it won't be. It would never be perfect. This is why I said all states are inherently violent as institutions. But when you have democratic control, when you have got control in terms of accountability, then the state is not violent, right? So in a sense, it has to be negotiation between a state and democracy, the people. So that's what I mean. So you can't, and what nationalism does, and this is the danger of nationalism, what nationalism does is it prioritizes the state in the name of the people, right? And yet, what you find is in reality, there is a certain elite within that democracy who rule that state. See, that's why. So the struggle in India is not a struggle in India only, it's a struggle for a better form of political community. So again, coming back to the Kashmir Indian context, again, for me it's very clear that the fear of balkanization cannot be used to perpetrate human rights violations against people. That's how simple it is. There's no international. India is going against international law. India is going against the idea of humanity. For someone like me, therefore, let's say sitting in London, one say, how do you know? Right? How do I know what's happening?
That is one of the charges against you, because a lot of people believe that Professor Dibyesh Anand, who doesn't live in India, and a community in general which doesn't live in India, talk too much about the issues of Kashmir and how India is, atrocious in its nature, and how the Indian state has been suppressing the voices or oppressing the voices. So, again, does it become very fancy when you sit thousands of miles away from India, enjoying all the luxury of life, and talk about poverty and problems of Indian people?
No, I'm smiling at it because this is a very interesting argument, that to what extent someone with a diasporic identity, like myself, right, what right or responsibility do we have towards a place, one could say, homeland, right? That's how I see it. Now, thousands of kilometers away, I'm there, right? So enjoying life here. First, of course, how one would know whether one enjoys life here or not. If you look at the middle class life in India, the bourgeois life, that's much more exploitative than anything here. And as you would know here, we do our own work. And look at the middle classes there. They always have servants and maids and everyone. So let's not talk of the luxury part. Now, long distance is a valid question. How would I know what goes on Kashmir? I wouldn't, truthfully, right? But how would someone sitting in Bombay know what's going on in Kashmir when they have never been to Kashmir? They've only seen Kashmir through Arnab Goswami or through movies. So the same criticism, which can be leveled against me, that I'm distant and therefore I don't have the right to speak, should be leveled against 99.99% of Indians who have never been to Kashmir and not ever spoken about Kashmir.
No, the counter is that, so again, people like you, when they talk about the issue of Kashmir or any issue for that matter, they don't focus on education, how to say have a better education system in India, or how to get rid of poverty if they can, or enhance the healthcare in India. They only engage in all those issues which somehow causes a declination of Indian image as a country in the world.
Again, I mean, our role as public intellectual, I'm seeing that there are two things, like diasporic nationalist, a diasporic person, as well as, let's say, public intellectual. Now, when there's so many Indians, right, many of them Gujarati Indians, let's say, or whatever, so many Indians, upper caste Indians, who support Modi, Indian media, Indian nationals celebrate that. What right do those diasporic Indians, remember, I have been here for 20 years, they have been there forever, they've never been to India, many of them, or they've been to India only recently. What right do they have to speak for India, speak about India? According to your logic, they shouldn't have any right, they should keep quiet. Then how come Indian nationalists celebrate that aspect? They find certain Indians who achieve something, let's say in the US or UK, and celebrate it. Why would they celebrate that? They shouldn't celebrate that. It's very clear. So if you take example of the 1950s, 60s Congress nationalism, they were very clear. If you have left India, then you're not Indian, practically. So let's go back to that logic. Then I shouldn't have the right to speak about India. But so would the so-called pro-Indian, or if they're not pro-Indian, by the way, pro-BJP.
It's not about taking your rights. It's not about taking your rights away from Indian. I mean, you can speak whatever you want to. It's a free world. But the issue is a lot of people who do not live in India, they primarily focus on all those controversial issues rather than believing in the system, or not believing in the system, at least helping the system to enhance from its own level where it stands today. So people take a lot of pride in speaking about Kashmir or Northeast or the atrocities on people elsewhere in the country. But they don't focus on poverty or education and come up with any brilliant idea or radical idea for that matter that might help the people of India in the first place.
Would you say Amartya Sen's ideas, remember Amartya Sen lived outside India, right? Are his ideas helpful for India?
Depends in what context.
So if he says something in favor of India, says India is such an amazing country, it's doing well, some would say, oh God, wow, he's a good Indian. If he says India could be an amazing country, but for that it needs to do these things, then he would be seen as anti-national. So see, we are entering into slippery territory here. Entering into slippery territory, it's not about my right. Of course, no one can take away my right. People have right not to listen. That's always there. In fact, in my view, there are hardly any people from Indian origin who speak about Kashmir. Hardly any Indian origin. There are people who will be critical of Modi, for instance, right? Because of the growing Hindu nationalism. But even they would not speak of Kashmir. There might be 3 or 4 people I can count in the UK in terms of academia who would speak about Kashmir, and that's not representative. In fact, more should be speaking about it because, as I said, I don't believe in strong nationalism. But even if I was a strong Indian nationalist, I would believe that for me the purpose is not to paint a rosy picture of India, but it is to actually ask genuine questions that makes India a better place for everyone, including places it occupies and controls, right? Make it a better place so that then India can truly be a good place.
Okay.
That's how I see it.
All right. So there is an interesting question coming in my mind that is there anything good about India that you like? I'll ask this question later, but let's come to Prime Minister Narendra Modi. You don't seem to be a fan of Prime Minister Modi. I mean, of course, you have every right not to be a fan of Prime Minister Modi or any party for that matter. But can I ask you, why do you oppose Narendra Modi?
You should ask the question, why is anyone a fan of anyone? Because fan, is about adulation. It's like, wow, you're so good. Everything about you is good. It's almost creepy. I mean, the people when they start stalking the Hollywood, Bollywood fan, they're the fan. Why would anyone be a
supporter?
Fan?
Let's use the word supporter.
Supporter. Or in Indian context, the bhakts, right? Now, again, there's a difference. The bhakts would be, again, those are like almost, unquestioning. And in a democracy, it's not healthy to have that bhakti kind of thing, right? Now, supporter. One could say, yes, as a matter of principle, one could say, is Modi doing well, good for India? One could say 80%, 20%, 30%. So one analyze. So we should be talking supporters. The problem with Modi is Modi has developed a cult around him where either you're his fan / bhakt, right? Or you are out. You're anti-national. So the problem I have with Modi, of course, there are many problems. It starts with the Gujarat riots. It starts with the Gujarat the pogrom. It is about him being a proud Hindu nationalist. It is about him maintaining selective silence when his party members of the wider Sangh family, are killing Muslims in the name of beef, right? So the beef lynching.
But he has never endorsed that, Professor Anand. Has he ever said that, okay, go and kill all the Muslims or minorities in the country?
Try to look at Hitler's speeches about Jews when he said that they should be gassed in concentration camps. There was only one speech, and that too was leaked. Otherwise, he never said that you should kill the Jews. So let's not go into what he says. Sometimes through silence we can do it. So when it's very visible. The beef lynching is controversial. This whole love jihad thing is quite controversial. How many times has he said that those who will indulge in this will be kicked out of the party, that government will take strict actions against them, and they have actually taken action against them. In fact, in recent case examples, all those who were accused of lynching have been freed by the courts. Courts in the states that are ruled by the BJP.
So are you suggesting that somewhere BJP or the party which is ruling in India is playing its role in making sure that those people who are accused of being a part of all the heinous crimes are being freed? Are you saying that the state is somehow pressurizing people?
No.
Because the people of the ruling party will come to you and say, well, there are courts to decide the matter. We are nobody to intervene. And if the courts are setting them free, who are we and who are you not to question it?
Now, again, but when someone comes out of the court or comes out of the jail and a BJP minister goes and garlands them, that itself shows to you what their approach is, isn't it? So again, we don't even need to look at, let's say, a critical radical scholar like myself to argue that. Even the mainstream Indian written print media, not the TV one, print media has been highlighting how the ways in which those who have been supporters or those who have been accused of lynching have been released, and you have got BJP ministers coming garlanding them. Those who have been saying that they are true Hindu nationalists who will be supporting Modi. So we don't even need to go into much detail of the ways in which the ideology of the ruling party in this case, right, fits very much with what these people are doing. So they're not different. They're part of the same whole.
But can I ask a personal question? Does it not make you happy as an Indian? But you are a British Indian now. But if you have a connections with India,
I have a good connection with India.
All
My
right,
family is in India.
All right. So does it not make you happy when you see the Indian Prime Minister being talked about across the globe when he comes to the United Kingdom or goes to US for that matter? Does it not make you happy that your Prime Minister is being talked about across the globe as a powerful leader?
Again,
How do you respond? What do you talk to us? So you switch on the television, you see Prime Minister Modi on the screen, and he's being welcomed by leaders of the world. Does it not make you happy as an Indian? Because in the past you didn't have that kind of recognition.
I'll tell you why it doesn't. Simple thing is, right now in the world, the leader who's most welcome is Xi Jinping, the Chinese leader. Why is he being welcomed? He's being welcomed not because of a true democratic leader. He's being welcomed because of a powerful leader, right? A powerful leader of a very powerful country. So by that logic, we should not. I have no respect for leaders of other countries, right? So the fact that they are welcoming Modi is neither here nor there. Now, second, should Indian nationals, for instance, in this case, be happy that, we have a prime minister who's being welcomed by the... Why that level of inferiority complex that you need outside leaders? And in this case, by the way, note, most of the time when Indian media celebrates these things, it's almost always white leaders, or leaders of white countries, white dominated countries, who are welcome. How many times have you seen Modi's pictures with the leaders of African countries and Indians taking pride in it? That itself reflects the biases that exist in India. For me,
not only in India, everywhere in the world.
Yeah, but
you cannot blame Indians for that.
No, but we can blame everyone. But the point is, there's chromatism. Indians are good at talking of racism, and Indians suffer it in different countries. But when Indians perpetrate racism and chromatism, then bias around color, then most Indian nationalists, at least, they keep quiet. Now, again, to example, I think Indians are really living in a bubble. Indian nationalists, I would say. Nationalists are living in a bubble because when you look on television, I think there's no evidence that actually India is being seen as a good power. If anything, few years ago, world leaders would talk of India as world's largest democracy that can bring together Hindus, Muslims, Christians under a secular framework, right? That's what they're talking of. Today, if you look at much of Western media, right, you'd find that it's quite divided. There's hardly any article in favor of Modi. Most of the articles are talking about lynching.
But who cares about what Western media thinks about India?
But who cares about Western leaders think? Why should we care about that?
Well, we should care about it because you are presenting India as a country which was not seen as powerful as it is being seen today.
Look, I'm very interested in that. Now I'm asking you the question if I was. But the fact that India is being seen as a powerful country, right,
with
India,
opportunities.
So I am someone who's riding rickshaw. I'm someone, for instance, right, who struggles to make my ends meet. I'm someone whose daughter gets raped by the upper caste men and they can get away with it because they're powerful. And you think that for someone like me, it would bring a lot of pride to see Indian Prime Minister being welcomed by world leaders? No. This pride is largely, again, a very Savarna, Savarna would be upper class, urban phenomenon where Indians have been wanting, and by the way, I'm older than you, I can say this.